And my second review of the night is going to be on the Super Nintendo version of Sunset Riders. Now, when it comes to Sunset Riders, this is probably one of the games that I have the most nostalgic factor of when I was a kid. When I was growing up in the 90s, when I had a Super Nintendo in elementary school, this was probably one of my favorite Super Nintendo games I've ever had, besides Zombies Ate My Neighbors, Street Fighter 2, and the Mario games, pretty much. This is probably one of my favorite games I've ever had, and playing it with my cousin Erica, and I'm sure I played it with some of my friends, and I don't know if I played it with any other family members. It was a fun game, and it's like it's kind of like Contra in a way, just not as hard, and it has a cowboy setting. You're a cowboy. You can pick between four different characters in the game, and you basically just go through the levels, take out the enemies, and kill the boss at the end. Fight the boss and defeat him. Pretty much the gameplay is just that. It's kind of like Contra. It's just a side-scrolling game where you go from one part of the level all the way to the next part, to the end of it, fighting all the enemies in your way, and you go in there and defeat the boss, and you get killed in one hit. So basically, and also there's three difficulties. There's easy, normal, and hard. And you can set up your life, so you can go into the options and set how many lives you want. The max amount of lives for easy is 5, for normal is 4, and for hard is 3. And besides just the amount of lives you can get, it also depends on how fast the bullets are. On easy, the bullets go slow from your opponents, and on hard, they go fast, and medium's in the middle, pretty much. And basically, the graphics presentations of the game, I would say they're great Super Nintendo. They're probably one of the best style, like graphic styles. The presentation of the game I've seen, and the game is presented in like a pretty cool way. It's kind of like a cartoonish cowboy setting. It's kind of like a Contra gameplay where you go from one side level to the other and you fight enemies, having a set amount of lives. And pretty much that's the whole idea of the game. And I'd have to say the style of the graphics and the presentation of the game in itself is actually quite good. The sound of the game, a lot of the music in the game I actually really like. The voice acting is decent. You know, for a Super Nintendo game, it's actually pretty good. It's pretty decent. It has that kind of like, the volume's kind of like, what's the term I could use? Basically is it's kind of hard to tell. Basically, some voices that they didn't have the subtitles at the bottom, you couldn't tell probably what they say because sometimes they do. You can probably tell a general idea, but sometimes some words aren't as understandable as others. But the music in the background is great. It's some of the greatest video game music I've probably ever heard, and I especially the music that is on level 1. The story of the game is basically you're just some cowboy helping out, like I'm sure very like a town or a certain part of, I don't know, wherever you're at, taking out these enemies and the final boss. Although I never have beaten the game, especially when I was younger, but I've gotten farther since I bought this version. Sir Richard Rose and basically his men, and then I think the guys before you fight the final 3 guys are basically, I don't know if they work for him or if they're just villains that you end up fighting. I don't know. And basically you just fight your way through the boss. I think there's about 10 levels, 12. And all the levels except for one, all the levels are based off bosses, and only one of the bosses is only a boss fight. The rest of them are levels before it. And I've only been able to make it to like the Indian guy, Chief Wigwam, or I think that's his name, something like that. And so far I haven't been able to beat him yet. But all the bosses are pretty much fun to play, and the story is basically just taking out these enemies and then getting to Sir Richard Rose and beating him, basically to save the town. That's kind of like the general idea of the story. The multiplayer, it's fun playing with other people. I can't really say now, but back then I played with my cousin Erica, and I think I played with some other family members and some friends, and it's actually quite fun. It's fun to play alone, but it's also a fun multiplayer game. You and one other person have 2 people playing the game. And basically, the multiplayer is just you going through the main game, with a second person. The arcade version was 4 players, but the Super Nintendo version is only 2. Although I've never played the arcade version, I've seen like videos on YouTube and heard about it and stuff. So basically, in the end, I would have to say that Sunset Riders is a fun game. It has good SNES graphics and presentation to it. It's a good multiplayer game, especially if you want to play with other people. If you want to get it for that. It's close to the arcade version. It's closer than the Sega Genesis version. It has interesting bosses. All of them have interesting like character, like personalities and their own sayings and stuff. And most of them, if they're all different ways to fight these bosses, you need to come up with different strategies for pretty much most of them. It has great music. I like the music, and I'm sure a lot of other people like the music too. And it has some pretty decent voiceovers for a Super Nintendo game. So basically, in the end, I will give the gameplay a 9.5 out of 10, the graphics presentation of the game a 9 out of 10, the sound of the game a 9 out of 10, the story of the game an 8.5 out of 10, and the multiplayer game a 9 out of 10. So in the end, I give Sunset Riders on the Super Nintendo a 9 out of 10, and I recommend it to anyone out there that has a Super Nintendo and likes games like Contra and stuff like that. It's a fun game. I had fun with it growing up. I'm having fun with it now since I played it. It's just I can't really put my fingers on it, and it's just a fun game. And if you have a Super Nintendo, get this. And like I said when I did my Saturday Night Slime Masters review, I want this game on the Wii Virtual Console as well, both the Super Nintendo and the arcade versions. And well, that's my review of Sunset Riders on the Super Nintendo. Hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you with some more videos this weekend. I'm hoping to put out some more top 10 lists probably out this weekend. And if I can, I want to do my review on Pokemon Soul Silver on the Nintendo DS, probably Saturday or so. And that's basically my plans for videos this weekend. And I will see you guys in my next movie.